Suspension training exercises, module 2, lower body, and this is the second part. So part 2, this presentation will look at the single leg variants of the squat movement exercises and supplementary exercises associated with this movement or muscles. So we're going to be looking at single leg squats and also lunges. So our first exercise we'll look at is called the pistol squat. It's a single leg squat movement, but whenever the leg is in front, as you see with the image in the background, it's just referred to as a pistol squat. So this is going to work the quads and glute muscles predominantly. On the coaching side, we want to lower the hips down towards the heel again, keeping the foot flat, and again ensuring the knee tracks in line with the shoelaces. For the regression, as we did with the two-footed or parallel stance squat, you want to lean back against the straps, making the squat more angled. To progress it, we can move the foot backwards, making the squat more vertical and using the straps less. And again, if you want to make it challenging, we can also add more load using a free weight like a kettlebell or a dumbbell. So here we see the pistol squat or single leg squat with the other leg in front. So we're going to use both straps, can use one if you want to make it a little bit harder. And again, we can use the arms a little bit more to make it easier on the way up, or you can use the arms very little to make it a little bit harder. Again, the idea, single leg squat movement, dropping the hips down towards the heels, keeping that foot flat on the ground and keeping the knee tracking in line with the shoelaces. Now to progress, as we've seen with the other exercises, we can do it in a jumping pattern, and this one will actually do it alternating, so you're going to swap legs with each repetition. You could do it jumping pistol squat all on the same leg for the duration of the set, and then swap legs on the consecutive set. Again, with the additional ground reaction forces as you land, it's a lot of stabilization required. And again, we're trying to get a full range of motion. It's not absolutely essential when you do the jumping variations, but when we're doing the slower variations, you do want to work through a full range if possible. And then we can do what we refer to as a single leg squat and lateral reach. So this is, again, it's just a single leg squat, just as we did a minute ago, but with the other leg being held out in front. Now, in this case, we're going to reach out to the side. So this again is going to work the quads, glutes, also going to work the abductor muscles a little bit more, and the adductor to a lesser degree for stabilization. Coaching side, you want to squat downwards, lowering the hips towards the heel. Again, this time we're going to be reaching laterally with the other leg as far out to the side as possible. To progress it, you can move the feet backwards again to make the squat more vertical, using the arms a little bit less, and you can reach further with that other leg. So here we see this in action. Leaning back, but in this case we're adding a lateral reach with that additional leg. You can use it to kind of tap to the ground if you want to help you with a little bit of balance. But because we're opening the hips out as well, it does make the squatting leg, so in this case the right leg, work harder just on the stabilization. There's a little bit of transverse forces, so the knee wants to cave in, and you have to work a little bit harder to try to control that. Now, another variation you could do this is what we call a transverse reach. So you perform it as per the lateral reach, so pretty much the same, but instead of just putting the leg out to the side, what we actually do is we really rotate the hips outwards. And you rotate them outwards slowly as you kind of lower down. So you're adding more transverse force towards it. And you may not stop at 90 degrees, you may bring that foot even further around. And again, this means that the squatting knee, in this case, see with the image in the background, the right leg is going to need to work a lot harder to control those transverse forces and prevent the knee pronating or caving inwards. And then we move on to lunging. So this is where there's an actual kind of step into a split squat position. So in this case, the lateral lunge is you're going to step out to the side. So we start leaning backwards, we take a nice wide step out to the side, and then lunge downwards, dropping that hips down towards the heel, and again keeping the knee tracking in line with the shoelaces. So this is a frontal plane exercise, means you're going to be working the abductors and adductors a little bit more for control. Whether you keep that other foot flat on the ground, lift the toes up, rotate the leg, are all little style variations that different people prefer, kind of depends how they want to perform the exercise. Now we have a crossover lunge. So effectively this is a step over in front of the other leg. So you're stepping to the right with the left leg. So you kind of finish up in this curtsy squat position, but we call it a lunge because there's a definite step and additional ground reaction forces. As you see, the leg that we're stepping over across, the heel rises up, so we finish on the toes on that right foot, and then it's a big push back to get us into the start/finish position. You can do it all on one side, or you can alternate sides with each repetition. It depends how you want to perform the set. Then we have the reverse crossover lunge or crossover squat. So the difference with this one is I'm actually not kind of stepping across to get into this curtsy squat position. We're actually kind of lifting one foot off the ground and then reaching back and across. So some people can refer to it as a reverse crossover lunge. Strictly speaking, it's not actually a lunge on that leg because that foot never leaves the ground. So it's also referred to as reverse crossover squat. You can kind of use the terms interchangeably, although strictly speaking, you would classify as a squat, but it's just semantics. So this is going to work the quads, the glutes, as per a lot of the squatting movements. Main difference now is in particular, it's going to be very good for switching on the hip abductors of that lead leg. And also you're going to be getting, to a lesser degree, adductor activation as well. So the coaching side, we're going to step back and across with one foot, and you're going to squat downwards on the lead leg like you're performing a curtsy for royalty. You want to keep the hips facing forward. That is hugely critical. If you allow the hips to turn outwards, you actually stimulate those hip abductors less. So in order to get the femur going across the hips in relative adduction, you need to keep the hips facing forward. For regression, limit the range of motion that the rear foot reaches. And if you want to progress it, you can increase the velocity of the movement or add additional load. So here we see this being performed then. Say whether you call it reverse crossover lunge or squat. We're lifting one foot off the ground, reaching back and across diagonally and squatting down on that lead leg. Keep the hips facing forward. And again, you can use your arms as much as you want for a little bit of assistance if you need to. Some people like to add an additional hip lift, as we see here, or knee lift. So as you bring the leg forward, you kind of lift the hips up to kind of 90 degrees or a little bit more. Mark, being from a bit of a martial arts background, quite likes that variation as well. And then following the same format previously, you can make it harder by adding a jump to it. So you bring that knee up and forwards, jump off the ground. So again, as we land, we have these additional ground reaction forces. So if you're looking for additional stimulation of these hip abductors on the outside part of the hip, then adding this additional control as you land is really going to switch these muscles on through the kind of muscle spindle activation. Staying on the lunge side of things, we have what we refer to as a reverse lunge. Strictly speaking, it's not a lunge, but we'll ignore that. So what you're doing here is you're actually stepping back into a split squat position. And again, you can adjust the foot position. It's nice and easy. It's quite a low intensity exercise, this one. If you want to do it with a single strap and add a bit of additional load with a kettlebell or a dumbbell, then you can make it a little bit harder that way. But it's a step back into a split squat position, but we normally refer to it as reverse lunge. The way again to make this harder can be to add a little jump into it. So we step back, and then as we bring that leg forward, you bring the knee up, having to control the landing. You can do it with a little bit of stabilization between each repetition, or as you see here, kind of dropping down straight into the next repetition to increase those ground reaction forces and the muscle spindle activation. Very sagittal plane exercise, so again, heavily on the glutes and quad of that lead leg. And now here we go into a slightly different kind of lunge movement. So this is a forward lunge with an overhead reach. Now this is what we're kind of using the straps for, the suspension system for now, is actually going to pull the arms up and into a different position. So in this case, this exercise is familiar to a lot of people. They may perform it with like a medicine ball, where they lunge forward and reach, kind of throw the medicine ball up above their head, and that helps to stimulate the anterior core. In this case, what we're doing is we're using the suspension system to pull the arms up and into that elevated position above our head to kind of switch on the muscles on the front of our stomach. So again, this is going to be working the legs, it's going to be working the hips, but unlike some of the other lower body exercises, it's really going to be switching on the anterior core. Coaching, key thing is you want to get into the correct end, or strictly speaking, the mid position first of all. So again, if you look at the image in the background, we'd actually get you into this position and make sure it's nice and comfortable. So generally the position that we're looking at is that the hands should be above the shoulders and above the hips, or the hands can be very slightly behind the shoulders if you're a bit more mobile, or slightly in front of the shoulders if you're very immobile. But generally speaking, that's where we want to get into. The reason we kind of get you into end position first is we don't want you just kind of lunging forward and then having your arms pulled back too far beyond your normal range of motion. So get you into the end point, and that way we know it's going to be a comfortable position to get into when you're doing it dynamically. You want to perform it dynamically rather than slowly, again, to optimize the muscle spindle activation. So the same principle as when we do our dynamic warm-up. If we do it slowly, you get less muscle spindle switching on the muscles. So we need to do this quickly in order to kind of really get these anterior core muscles to switch on as we want. So to regress it, you can perform it at a lower velocity, less range of motion, and to progress it, increase the range and perform it at a quicker tempo. So here we see this being performed then. So you start with the arms kind of in front of the chest and you lunge forward. And as you lunge forward, the straps are going to, if you maintain the tension on the straps, the arms are going to get pulled up and above the head, or the hands are going to get pulled up and above the head. And then as you're lunging, your pelvis is tilting forward, and as your arms are reaching above your head, your rib cage is elevating. And both those two things help to lengthen the anterior core, and that's what's going to help to switch on these core muscles. We then push back with the lead leg to get us back into the start position and repeat. So is it an exercise for lower body or more for switching on the core? You can kind of argue either, to be honest. But it is a very effective way of training. It's what we refer to as kind of almost like fixed strap training. So slightly different from some of the other suspension exercises, but once you get it right, it's a very good variation. Now we can tweak the way that we perform it if you really want to emphasize the core more than the lower body. And the way that we do that is you perform what we refer to as a kind of foot lift variation. The way that we do that is you lunge forwards, you allow the straps to pull your arms up above your head. Pretty much the descent, the first phase is identical. The main difference is again, looking at the image in the background, is at this midpoint. So you want to avoid simply pushing back using the lead leg like we were doing in the last variation. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to put all the kind of emphasis on your hands. You're actually going to lift the front foot straight off the ground. So rather than driving off, you're just going to lift it off the ground, and then you're going to use the anterior core and the upper body to return to the start position. So you're almost performing like a standing pullover movement. It's like a pullover crunch. So the arms are going to press down and forwards. The core is actually going to stabilize and or flex, and it's those two, that kind of pullover movement, that kind of slam or smash movement pattern, that's really going to help us to increase the overload on the core musculature. Other variations, where we could do a forward lunge with a chest fly. So rather than having the hands move out above the head, this time they're going out to the side. Again, you'd want to get into the end position first to make sure you're not overstretching the chest muscles, but it's just changing the kind of position that the handles move. So rather than moving them above the head, they're moving them out to the side. Less exercised, to be honest, than the previous version. Some people like it, some people not so keen. But as a variation to the overhead reach to focus a little bit more on the chest, then we can use that exercise. Again, following in the same kind of fixed strap methodology, you can also do a forward lunge with rotation. So rather than the kind of flexion where the straps are being pulled overhead, now you're actually going to lunge at an angle. You're still lunging forward, but you do it at an angle to the suspension system, so that as you're holding on to the handles of the straps, it's actually going to pull your torso around and rotate. So it's very similar to the lunge and overhead reach, but the switch to rotation is going to work the lateral rather than the anterior core muscles. So you want to position yourself about 45 degrees to the anchor, and then again you're going to just perform a normal lunge forward, and then in this case, as you see with the image in the background, it's going to pull the hands around to the side. So when you lunge, you always want to be lunging to get the most out of the exercise. You always want to be lunging with the leg closest to the system. So in this case, we've altered our position. You'd always want to be lunging forward with the right leg. To work the other leg, you then swap sides, but you don't want to be, if you see the image in the background, you wouldn't want to be lunging forward with his left leg because it's not really going to switch on the core muscles as much. So here we see this in action. You want to position yourself, set about 45 degrees. We can change the angle. So again, you'd get into the end point to make sure you're kind of feeling it in the lateral core muscles. Hold on with both hands. And then as we lunge forward, the hand's going to get pulled over that lunging leg and the torso is going to get rotated. And that's what's going to switch on these lateral core muscles. You don't want the angle to be too narrow. You don't want it to also kind of be too acute. Otherwise, it's either going to be stretching you too much or not stretching you enough. And then we have just a slight variation of that where we do it single arm. So again, we'd want to use the arm furthest away from the anchor. So in this case, he's using his left arm. So you lunge with the right leg, hold onto the strap with the left arm. And again, that's what's going to rotate the torso and switch on these lateral core muscles. So if we're looking at session and practical application, here's a couple of the sessions that you can practice. So we'd start off 2 exercises paired up. We have our suspension system squat with weight shift and our suspension system hamstring curl. It's going to do 30 seconds of the squat with weight shift, rest for 15 seconds and repeat. And that's just paired with the hamstring curls. A couple of minutes rest, and then we'd link in our suspension system lateral lunges and our forward lunge with an overhead reach, and then Bulgarian split squats left and right side. And then we have our second session where the pistol squats, we're just pairing up left hand side and right hand side. So again, you can always tell when they're paired because it's A1 and A2, so we do them in this case 30 seconds on the left hand side, quick transition, and then we do 30 seconds on the right hand side and repeat that for a total of 3 sets. You can tell that it's A1 and A2. If it was A1 and B1, then it would be you'd do all of the first exercise first. So these are actually paired together. A couple of minutes rest, and then we're going to do suspension system reverse crossover lunges and suspension system hamstring curls alternating. Now, just a quick note on this one, when we do the reverse crossover lunges, you need to alternate legs because it's only 3 sets. If you alternate legs per set, you're going to be uneven. So we'd actually need to alternate them with each repetition, and they are paired with our suspension system hamstring curls. A couple of minutes rest again, and then we're doing a lunge with rotation on the left hand side paired with the same exercise rotating on the right hand side. So those are our 2 sessions for you to kind of practice a little bit of application and see how you get on with those. So to review, the objective of this module were to give an overview of the lower body suspension system training exercises and provide coaching points and application for each exercise or variation. It's also to provide guided practice for the exercises and to give example lower body sessions for you to follow. So you should perform the guided learning hours for this section, which is 2 hours of guided practice on the lower body exercises and the same on the sessions. You want to take yourself through the list of exercises and then through the 2 example lower body sessions that we've gone through. And then you want to log the guided learning hours for your online submission. You need to complete the review questions as well before you move on to the next module.